We've been doing a series in church of late that today we bring to a culmination. I'm quite excited about the culmination of the story. You know, we've been doing this thing, we've called it, It's About Time, and we've been working through the different decades of a person's life. And I know that they are not prescriptive, but they are certainly descriptive of what life could look like. Kids, yeah, you could duck. And so today, we want to culminate this little journey that we have been on. It's all about time. So I want to suggest to you this. Let me take you for a quick little recap. If you're a visitor amongst us, I hope that this will in some way make sense to you. I need my pen. It was on here. Somebody can find it. Thanks, boy. Okay, here we go. This was what it was all about time. We divided life like a North and Cross sign. 9 sections. Each section depicts a different decade of your life. For those of you who have been following regularly, you will remember 1 to 10. The first decade of life is all about, do you like me? Every baby born presumes there's going to be somebody to love him or her, to feed him or her, and to care for her. Do you like me, however, is the question every little guy is asking. The second question is from the 10s to the 20s, and this is your teen years, where every teenager out there is asking, who am I? Just remind me again, who am I? Am I who my teacher says I am? Am I who my parents say I am? Am I who my peers say I am? Who am I? And we've talked about that. Then we turned to the 20s to 30s, and we looked at the fact that this is a big decision-making time when people are choosing careers and they're choosing life partners, and in the hopes that they can make some success in their minds out of life. So here's the guy looking for his career, looking for his wife. Generally, it happens in that age group. Then after 20s to 30s, life really gets hectic, and we end up looking like this. We end up looking like a chicken without a head. Remember, we said chicken without his head is running rampant. He doesn't know where he's going. He's running from this boss to that boss to this meeting to that meeting, and he's really got himself into a lot of hot water. He needs help. And so we look out there to see who can help him, and we find for ourselves a mentor. So from the 30s to 40s, this is an incredibly tough time. And then we have this half-time situation. But before I get there, 30s to 40s, I'm personalizing this, was a incredibly interesting and busy time. And the answer to that, or partly most of the answer, is found in finding good people to be around you, to guide you, and to encourage you. Well, I have good news today to introduce to you a lady who stood in the gap on our behalf during this time when Helene and I were running Richway like chicken without heads, 3 children, all young, and trying to keep her boss happy, trying to keep the demands. And into our life walked a lady called Bobs. And she was in this generation over here, and she stepped back into this generation over here to help us. She loved us. She oversaw us. And yesterday she arrived at the airport, and she's with us now. And when she arrived, I phoned Helene. I said, has the eagle landed? Because to us, she was like an eagle. She watched. She cared. She nurtured. She defended us during this critical period of time. So won't you please give a hand to our friend Bobs? There she's and if you. And she used to say this, if you mess with her, she says, see this? See this? She's still doing it to me. And she's 86 years old now, but I can tell you that. Anyway, Bobs, we appreciate it. You came into our life at that time. And then when you move to the 40s to the 50s, this becomes half-time like a rugby ball, like a rugby changing room, where they go in and they look at the strategy of the first half, ask, did it work? If it did, let's keep it on. If it didn't work, let's change it. It's at this time of your life that you get to make some fundamental changes about, is life meaningful? How do I make it better? What do I do to plan the second half of my life that much better? And it happens at halftime. And then after halftime, we get to the stage where we say, okay, now if I want to make my life more meaningful, how do I do that? And we did our silly little drawing here, which is meant to look like a bit of a square. And I've learned how to do this thing at last. And it goes like this. In order for you to draw 4 straight lines through this system here, you have to, man, I've done it wrong again. Okay. Done it wrong again. But you know what I'm talking about. You know, life is outside of the normal. Life is outside of the box that is your life. And the world wants to put you in a box. Satan wants to put you in a box that says, these are the boundaries in which you must be stuck in. Kids, don't fall for that. Don't for it. There is a lot of life, good life, outside of the normal, outside of the boundary of your life, if you'll just be courageous enough to step across the line and enter into a new world that is waiting for you. This is the world of moving from the success of this generation to the significance that you hope your success can be turned into. Remember, we said the formula from success to significance is found in sacrifice. You've got to sacrifice your success in order for you to become significant. We spoke a little bit about that. And then for you as a human being, you're in this phase of your life now, and it's hectic out there. You know, you're holding on to your identity. You're sweating like crazy, drops of whatever, and you're just trying to hold on to who you were and who you think you still are. Your energy is getting less, your pains are getting more, and you determine that you're going to hold on to this. Meanwhile, the young guys with more energy and better ideas are coming through the ranks, and you're trying hard to keep them down because my identity is determined by what's happening at this particular place. And this is where we have to give it away. We give it away, our experience. We give away the things that we have learned, and we give away to that generation there to help them to become better. It's not meant for selfish people. Selfish people will never crack it here. They get territorial, they get cranky, they get grumpy, and they're miserable people to hang around. You've got to let go of some stuff. Well, here we are over here now. Now, as much as we were half-time here, I want to tell you here, we're in extra time. We're in extra time. Because the Bible says, if you get to live to 70, because this is where we're at, this is the 50s to the 60s, this is to the 60s, the 70s, and when you get to the 70s plus, you suddenly find that life needs to be reinvented once again. The Bible says that you're lucky if you live past 70 years. Which is 70. It says that if you get anything more than that, that's to the plus side of the ledger. If you get any more than your 10 years, that is to the plus side of life. And so as much as here you were at halftime, now you're at full time. Not just full time, but you're in extra time as you move in this direction. I want to tell you how to handle extra time today, and I hope that this will be good for you. First thing we're going to discuss is the thing we don't like to talk about. It is, how do you want to die? How do you want to die? Have you got an exit strategy of coming to the end of your life? If you haven't got one, I hope that you'll be able, as a result of today, begin to plan one and think about, what do I want to be in my exit strategy? Because I'm getting to the stage now where I'm not as young as I once was. Let me suggest this. You've got to look to places where you may never have looked before. You're going to look to places where you would never have thought that this was ever going to happen to me. I remember saying to myself, I want to go out with a bang. I don't know about you. I don't want to go out whimpering, looking pathetic. I'd rather go out with a bang. And so I planned my life. I met a guy in the States who agrees with me. I'm not the only one who thinks this, apparently. And he's joined up with a group of people over the age of 70 who distribute Bibles into some of the roughest countries in the world. They go to Iraq, Iran, and they move Bibles, they smuggle Bibles into that place. They take their lives into their hands to do this. Their stories are magnificent. So I've been twice now and had coffee with them when I've been to the States. I'm intrigued by the psychology of these men that say, we don't care. We have nothing to lose. We're soon to die. We either die in a hospital bed or we die like this, extending the kingdom of God. If we do die like this, it doesn't matter. We get to go to this glorious place called heaven. I just want to go out with a bang, and I get that. I understand what they're saying. And so when we look at this, we say, that guy thinks differently. But he's not the only one who thinks differently. There's a Bible character that I want to read to you a little bit about, and his name is Caleb. But before we do that, we've got to say, where does all this come from? Where does it come from? I watched a Rocky movie a while back, and it was one of his last ones, I think, where he wants to make another comeback, and he's hoping to regain the world title. But he knows this time he's probably not going to make it, but he wants to fight anyway. So he goes and finds his old trainer, and he says to the old trainer, I want to make a comeback. And the old trainer says to him, oh, Rocky, you're just angry. They took down your statue. You're just angry. And Rocky says, no, watch what happens in the movie. Watch the screens. That you still have in the basement of your life. And that's what will define what your next move should be. The basement is a place where you last explore and least explore. But in every one of our lives, there's something, I believe, that is in the basement. And when you hit this area, it's not over till you've been down to the basement and find out what is left and use that for the cause of the kingdom. I love that. The guy in the Bible that I want to read to you about, I'm really excited about, this guy by the name of Caleb. Caleb had stuff in the basement. He had stuff in the basement. He'd come with Moses. Moses had led the children of Israel into Jordan. Moses had died. Joshua had done that. And now Caleb was due to receive his inheritance of a piece of ground. There was a place there called the hill country. Nobody wanted it because giants were there. And Caleb, because he had something in the basement, he says to Joshua, I will take the hill country. Listen as I read. Now the men of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea about you and me? I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. And I brought him back a report according to my conviction. You see, conviction is bigger than a belief. A belief is an agreement with some academic information. A conviction is something you live out of what you say you believe. And he's saying, this was my conviction. But my brothers who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt with fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day Moses swore to me, the land on which your foot have walked will be your inheritance, and that of your children. Remember that. Forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the desert. So here I am. He's presenting himself. Here I am today, 85 years old, and I'm still strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was right back then. Now give me this hill country. Caleb found what was in the basement of his life. And he says, man, I'm not going to die and I'm not going to finish until I've explored that and done what I need to do. Give me the hill country. And then if you come to Deuteronomy 1 verse 36, God is talking about Caleb here. It's stunning. This is what God says. He says, have you seen my man Caleb? He follows me wholeheartedly. And that's when there are other interpretations of the Bible. It says, either it says he has followed me wholeheartedly, or he has a different spirit in him. But I like the interpretation that says, I have found my man Caleb, and he thinks differently. He thinks differently. People over the age of 70 to the 80s, people, we need to think differently. Our minds have been programmed to a particular style. We've bought into a status quo. We've bought into agreeing and living life according to the majority of the people around us. And the prevailing wisdom of the day is what dominates our thinking. We look around and we see other people doing what other people do, and it's not this. So when we think of doing this, we have to, hey, let me reprogram my mind. Let me reinvent the new section of my life, and let me find out what is in the basement, and let me think differently. I hope that you'll begin to do some of that stuff. Now, some may call it be upon to embark upon great ventures like Caleb was. There are others just like him in the Bible. Moses, 80 years old. He was delivered from the boredom of the Midian desert. 80 years old, and God comes to him at the burning bush. Maybe today will be a burning bush for you guys. You get to the burning bush, and you think that life is over. You think you're done, you're dusted, your history. Oh, it was great in Egypt. I learned some stuff. It was terrible, dry and boring, 40 years in the desert. And then you hear the news through the burning bush to say it's not over yet. There's still life to be lived. There's still stuff in the basement. Moses, I want you to go and take the children of Israel out of Egypt. Moses, can you do that? And he came with a sob story. Oh, Lord, you don't understand. I'm a failure. I couldn't possibly do that. I've lived here for 40 years, and God says, you better get over yourself, because there's stuff in the basement that you need to find. Or we could look at Sarah. What a great woman she was, 100 years old, and she's giving birth to a nation. You could look at Anna. This is beautiful. Luke chapter 2, there's a lady. Verse 36 says this. She was old. She lived with her husband for 7 years. Then she was widowed until she was 84. She then never left the temple, but worshipped night and day, fasting and praying. What kind of woman is that? She was widowed for many years, but she found her purpose. She found what was in the basement, and she found it and turned it into a format of worship and prayer and service in the kingdom of God. Look at even King David. I think this is so cool. Psalm 84, verse 10. King David says this, I'd rather be a housekeeper or a janitor in the house of the Lord than dwell in the tents of the wicked. He's saying, I would rather be sweeping the floors of the church, cleaning the windows, setting up the chairs. And we're all looking at him and saying, David, you can't do that. You're the king. You're the king. He says, but now I'm getting old. And there will be other people that will come behind me, and they will take over this role. And you say, well, Jay, what do you want to do? He says, I just want to clean the church. I just want to serve. There's something in the basement that says, I just want to keep serving. Please don't put me into retirement. Please don't stick me in a place where I can't fulfill a function. I just want to serve in the doorkeeper in the house of the Lord. That's the greatest king that ever lived from Israel. And here he is saying, man, what do you want to do when you get big? What do you want to get big, David? I just want to be a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord. That's what's in the basement. He does it beautifully. There's Aaron and Hur picking up Moses' hands on the side of the mountain as he prays. People, listen, we've got a young generation coming through our church who we really believe in. We really believe in. Please don't leave it to them. They will fight the battle down in the valley like Joshua did. But our role as over 70s is to hold up their hands and to protect them, to pray for them, to cheer them on while they're down in the valley. The success of the valley is determined by the praying on the mountain. Let's make sure we are a praying church for the next generation. All of these people I've mentioned to you basically got a couple of things in common. The first thing in common is they've refused the status quo. We said that just now. They're not settling for it's always been like this. Those words we don't want to hear. Oh, it's always been like this. Back in the old days, we did this, we did that. No. This is new thinking. We're thinking Caleb thoughts now. We're coming with different mindsets. These guys are the ones who have defied the prevailing wisdom to just stay at home, retire, and watch TV. Oh, man, I don't want to die like that. Do you? I don't want to die like that. Caleb thinks differently. He probably had thoughts going through his mind, Caleb did, saying it's not over till it's over. And he firmly believes that your best years, listen, old people, the best years should be your last years. They should be your most productive years as you're investing in the next generation. You are but one person, but you can share yourself with as many as you like to make your legacy bigger, to make your footprint bigger for the cause of the kingdom of God. I just have one last picture for you, and then I'll draw my picture. You know, Paul, at the end of his life, is sitting in a prison, a Roman prison. He's about to die. He's sitting on death row, and he writes a letter to his young protege, Timothy. And he's giving Timothy the things that really matter. This is deathbed talk. And the deathbed talk is always the most meaningful talk. We don't talk superficial stuff when we're on our deathbed. And he says to Timothy, Timothy, I'm like a drink offering. I'm all poured out. I have run the race. I have fought the faith. I have fought the fight. And I have kept the faith. Henceforth, Timothy, there's a crown of righteousness which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. But he pictures it in a bedding like a bucket. Now, some of you have known, I've said this to you before, your life is a bucket. On the day that you were born, God gave you a bucket, and your bucket was full. On the day of your life, God has an expectation that when you give that bucket back to Him, it will be empty. You too, like Paul, will be all poured out for the cause of the kingdom. Don't waste yourself pouring yourself out for things that don't count for eternity. We're going to start thinking prosperity to things of eternity. And those are the things that are going to count at the end of the day. Please listen. And as you do that, and as you pour yourself out for the cause of Christ, on the day that you pass, he says, and on that day, what day? It's the day that he stands before God, and he will stand with a smile on his face. And God will say, so Paul, what's left in your bucket? Let's have a look. And Paul will pick it up, and he'll turn it upside down and say, Lord, it's empty. My bucket is empty. I've spent it all. I've left it all out there. And God will smile and say, that's a good story of a life well lived. I need to tell you, one day we will stand before God, and God's going to peep in your bucket and say, you know, what happened? Oh, you got a half full bucket? You used it. What happened to the other half? Why didn't you pour this out for the cause of the kingdom? There were people who needed what you had in your bucket. You never used it. It's not a heaven or hell issue, but it is a blessing issue. People, you want to stand before God like those stewards in the story Jesus told. And they want to have empty buckets to get the assurance of God to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Let's make sure that our buckets are empty. Here's the bucket. And it's empty. That's your life. Make sure it's like that. My next question, which basically will deal with this box here, 80s and onwards, is how do I finish well? How do I finish well at the end of the day? Well, as Caleb was our example in that first one, I want to suggest to you that Jesus is the example in the second. Jesus knew how to die well. You know, in the days of the Christians at Jesus' time, terrible persecution took place, and the Romans were killing Christians by their hundreds, not thousands. And the Romans were confused by these Christians because they said of them, man, these Christians die well. These Christians die with courage. They don't go whimpering out of this world. They die with the courage of their convictions. These people are incredible. And when that centurion stood at the cross and watched Jesus die, they declared the same thing. They said, man, surely this guy is somebody special. Surely this man could even be the Son of God. Look how he died. Well, I invite you to look how Jesus died. First thing he did on the cross was he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. If you're on your deathbed and you're going to wherever you're going, and you haven't forgiven, hey, baby, it's late, hey? You need to start forgiving now. Forgiveness is part of the deal. The streets in heaven are paved with forgiveness. So you either forgive now because you're going to have to forgive then. So rather do it now than wait till then. Forgiveness is key. That you are forgiven, first of all, by God for your own sin. That you have a relationship with Him based upon salvation and His shed blood and you receiving your forgiveness. And then for goodness sake, as much as you have received, people, you have to give. You've got to give it to other people. Because when you get to heaven, I'm telling you what, people, you're going to have to forgive them there. So rather forgive them now that you don't have to do it there. How's this for a thought? The Apostle Paul, that great hero of the faith, was a mean guy. He had killed a substantial number of Christians, put them in jail, had them martyred. One day he meets Jesus. His life is turned around. But those martyrs that he've killed have all gone to heaven. And then one day Paul dies, and he walks through the pearly gates. You know who's the first to greet him? It's the martyrs that he killed. They're there, and they're applauding him. Say, Paul, you made it. And he's looking at them and say, aren't you the guys I killed? Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore. Paul, we've forgiven you. You made it to heaven, Paul. We celebrate that. Forgiveness people is key to a good finishing well. Please make sure that you do that and do it well. The tragedy of leaving this world unforgiven is terrible. The second thing you've got to do if you want to finish well, you've got to think redemptively to the end. There's Jesus' example. He's hanging on a cross. He's in unbelievable pain. You know, the crucifixion process is known to be the most painful form of death and torture. There's a man on his one hand who's a thief. He declares himself, I deserve what I'm getting. And Jesus has a conversation with him. I wish I could have been hearing more of that conversation. But the thief declares, Lord, I believe that you are who the sign above your head says. You are the Son of God. If you are the Son of God, won't you take me to heaven with you? And Jesus smiled through the blood and the no teeth and the beaten up and the stripes on his back. And he says, my man, today you will be with me in paradise. Even in the last moments of Jesus' life, the guy's thinking redemptively. I'm going to take one more soul to heaven. If you've ever heard the story from Rick Warren of his dad who was passing from this life to the next, and he tells a story. He says he was sitting by the bedside of his dad. He didn't have long to go. And his dad kept saying, one more, one more, one more, over and over, one more, one more, one more. And eventually the family gathered around his bed and they said, Dad, what is this one more? What is one more? And he cries and he says, one more soul for Jesus. Even on his deathbed, he's saying, I just need one more soul to Jesus. I just want to take one more soul to heaven with me. One more soul for Jesus. He was right to the very end of his life. He was thinking redemptively. Your death speaks volumes to people. You do know that, hey? Your kids are going to watch. Your family are going to have to be a part of your death experience, probably. Leave them a good story to tell. Leave them a great story to tell. In John chapter 19, Jesus does a very practical thing. We need to do the same. He makes provision for those who are left behind. Even in his pain, he looks down, he sees his mom, and he sees John, his favorite disciple. He says, Mom, there's John. He's going to look after you. John, will you look after my mom? And he makes provision for his mother, even at the height of Jesus' beautiful sense of humanity, that even in his last days, he's making provision for those who he loves. Leave a good reputation behind. Then John 19, it says, Jesus cried, it is finished. And he bowed his head and he gave up his spirit. Just two quick things here. When he says it is finished, you all know that he wasn't saying I am finished or I have finished. No. He was saying it. What does he mean? The mission, the commission that God came for me to come and to redeem the world and to die has been fulfilled. It is finished. I have done. My bucket is empty. I am ready to return back to my Father in heaven again. It was finished. Jesus wasn't finished. He still had to rise again. He still had to go down to hell and stand on the head of Satan and take the saints of old. He still had a job to do. But this phase in his life was over. It was finished. People, don't you want to die with the job having been finished? The same as he. And then it says this, he bowed his head and he gave up his spirit. I don't want to overreact to that, but I wonder that if we can't participate more in our death experience than we realize. He didn't just die because his body gave up. He gave up his spirit. I reckon we're able to do a lot more of that than we realize. People, I'm urging you not to hold on longer than you need to. And I know we all want to hold on and see how long we can live. But I've got to tell you, the sooner I cross that bar to get to heaven, the happier I'm going to be. And so too will you. Don't hold on too long. Hold on so that you can finish well and be forgiving and be forgiven and all those things. But give yourself to the will of God as soon as you possibly can. And I reckon we have a lot more participating power in that event than we would ever begin to realize. I give up my spirit indicates that Jesus was in total control of his own death. He was in control. Satan didn't take his life from him. Jesus gave it to him. He laid it down. So there we have it. There's one last box I have to fill here, and it's the box that comes with Paul's thing, where he says, I have fought the good fight, I've kept the faith, I've run the race. Henceforth there is for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord will give to me on that day, and I will celebrate that forever. The crown is called righteousness. Then it's done. Then you can go and enjoy eternity. But I do have a sobering note for you today. Listen to Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 30. Jeremiah says this. I don't know who this applies to. Might apply to somebody. The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and you have not been saved. You see, everything here, right the way from here to there, is dependent on you getting saved. It's not over until you have had that experience of coming to God in repentance, asking for forgiveness. Now, back in the 1970s, where we are today, we've taken this time walk backwards, there was a hymn we sang over and over. And it was generally the response hymn. A guy would stand up and preach, and he would say, we're going to sing a great hymn, just as I am, without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me. And it was a hymn that we all knew so well. It would close off every evangelistic rally. And many people today have walked the aisle to salvation to that beautiful song. Maybe I could ask today, has anybody here come to know Christ and that was your walk to the aisle? I know Mike has. Anybody else walk to that song? You guys aren't saved yet, so there are a couple. Just as I am. So I remember as a 13-year-old kid, the guy preaching his heart out, singing that song. As a 13-year-old kid, I walked with tears in my eyes and I said, Lord, just as I am, I come to you and I give myself to you. If you have not done that, there will be people in the prayer rooms afterwards. If you'd like to share with them, that would be really, really cool. So we're going to sing that song right now, just as I am, without one plea. It'll bring back huge memories to many of us. So let's make sure we sing it really well.